Good evening, everybody. This is Jackie Luqman.
And I'm Abdul-Shahid Luqman.
And welcome to Live and Coffee Current Events in Politics and Luqman Nation.
The most dangerous show on the internet.
Yep.
I like saying that.
I know, he loves saying that. I like to let him say that.
We are the most dangerous show on the internet.
I think we are. We're kind of the sleeper dangerous show on the internet. Right. So welcome to Live. And tonight is Thursday. It is April 19th, and we're coming to you from Washington, D.C. And
no, we're coming to you from D.C. Washington is D.C. downtown.
That's true.
Yeah, we're coming to you from D.C.
We're the D of the DMV, the District, Maryland, Virginia part. But Washington, D.C. is the official seat of the government of the United States of America, and that ain't where we live. That's
right.
Not we're not associated with those people. We just want to make that really, really clear.
So we're coming to you from D.C.
From the D.C. Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. So what we got tonight? So
tonight, you guys, I really just wanted to talk kind of informally a little bit. Usually we do a lot of preparation for this show. I just really feel like I need to tell you that, like, we're not like scholars or, you know, we're not official pundits.
No.
We just really love politics because we understand how important politics are to your everyday life, to my everyday life, to our everyday life. And if we do not understand politics and history and how one influences the other, how one shaped the other, we will never understand why we got here.
Right. And
we will never understand how to get past where we are to get to a better place. And we are both really, really passionate about that. And so usually when we do our shows, whether it's here on Coffee Current Events in Politics and Luqman Nation, whether it's on Pit Bulls in Politics, that's a lot more freewheeling than this show, but we still do a lot of preparation.
Yes.
And especially on Brick by Brick, which we are working on revamping and relaunching. I have not forgotten about that. Stuff has just been happening so fast. We usually do a lot of research. I mean, we usually finish a show on Thursday night, and then we immediately start researching for what we're going to talk about the next week. Usually what happens is something catches our eye. We'll be watching the news and some issue catches our eye, and then we have to divert and dig into that. And then that's on top of being invited onto a regular segment that we have been asked to participate in on Loud and Clear. On Sputnik Radio. We're going to talk about that later on in the show. Every week, every Friday, we have our own segment,
right,
or we participate in a segment on Sputnik Radio on Loud and Clear with Brian Becker and John Kiriakou, where we talk about midterm politics, which we don't usually talk about on this show.
No.
But every once in a while, we get invited pretty regularly onto By Any Means Necessary with the Eugene Puryear and Sean Blackman. And we talk about local politics and black issues on that show. And then still we get invited on to Fault Lines.
Fault Lines. Without Nixon and
Lee Stranahan. All on Sputnik Radio now. But they're all on Sputnik Radio because these are people who mainstream media didn't want to hear from.
Right. That's right.
Right? And the important thing to mention, which I really do think is very cool about Fault Lines, is that if you're familiar with Garland Nixon, you know that Garland is progressive. He's very much on the left. But Lee Stranahan is a conservative.
Right.
So, you know, we get invited on...
So like the old Hannity Combs.
Right. So we get invited on these shows, and we got to prepare for these shows. Because we don't, as much as we love politics, we don't like to go into any discussion, you know, cold. Because you just, that's how people trip you up. So usually we do a lot of preparation, but this week we didn't because we had a lot of stuff going on. Last Friday, we were down in Richmond with our friends, the Virginia Defenders. at their 15th anniversary.
Right. Shout out to Phil Waledo and Anna Edwards.
Hello, y'all, and everybody else in the Defenders. And then Saturday, we came back up to D.C. and represented ourselves and the Virginia Defenders in the United National Anti-War Coalition's spring actions, which happened all around the country.
Right.
We participated in an anti-war and no war in Syria protest and march. Protest in front of the White House and march to George Washington University, where we kind of got a surprise that we were on the teach-in panel on Saturday. And then, you know, there was Sunday regular church stuff. And then there was work throughout the week. And it's just, that's how our weeks kind of go. So this week we didn't do a whole heck of a lot of preparation for this show. Both of us were sick. So we didn't even know if we're going to do it. He's still a little germy. I'm getting over mine. But something happened the past couple of days that I feel like we really need to talk about.
What was that?
There's this problem that we are having in the progressive communities on the left, whatever you want to call it, among leftists, that we are succumbing to the problem of false equivalencies. And I don't think we understand, well, yeah, we do understand it. People are just real gullible when it comes to falling for false equivalencies in certain discussions. Because people don't want to be seen as colluding with the enemy. And I said colluding intentionally. People don't want to be seen as colluding with the enemy. So people will believe a false equivalency so that they don't seem like they are in league with enemy factions.
Right.
So what that does, unfortunately, is it accomplishes exactly what the people who trot out these false equivalencies want to accomplish, and that's to silence dissent.
Exactly.
That's okay. Case in point, and I want to say hey real quick to our friends over on YouTube. Hey Lisa. Hey Marlon Gall. Syria. Let's talk about Syria.
There you go. Talk about it.
Because, like we said, I think last week, Syria is a complicated situation. It's not. It's not something simple. It's not something you can sit here and in 10 minutes really just explain everything that is going on and has gone on in Syria. We're talking about years, decades of really messed up policy and uninvited American imperialism. Mix in the existing crisis in the Middle East between Israel and Arab nations, mix into that the involvement of Saudi Arabia and arming what do you want to call them? Syrian forces, basically arming terrorists.
Right.
Because the United States,
the opposition.
The opposition. Yeah. See, the media, the United States media, the corporate-owned media, sanitizes the people, the Syrian coalition, and that's Syria, Russia, and Iran, and a few other countries in the Middle East. American corporate media sanitizes the people that the Syrian coalition are fighting against by calling them rebels. But really, they're terrorists. Honestly, they're ISIS. They're ISIS and groups like ISIS. And Saudi Arabia has been arming them. And not only has Saudi Arabia been arming them, but Israel has been helping some of them.
Right.
So there's all this going on. And then there is, yes, Bashar al-Assad is a dictator who is also a monster in regard to his own policy in Syria. All that's true. And it is also true that the United States has flat out blatantly lied about some things that have gone on in Syria in order to provide a pretense for getting involved in Syria. All of that is true. So this is not something that you can just sit there and in a few minutes, well, this is why we're involved in Syria, and we have to be involved because of the moral case. No, that it's not that simple, and we recognize that. The problem is people don't want to have that kind of conversation about Syria, right? People just want to make it into Assad is evil and he gassed his people, so we needed to bomb them. And then the people who would push back against that argument are saying, we don't need to be bombing anybody. That's the problem. The United States has been bombing too many people, and we're sticking our nose in other people's business, and we're doing it for reasons that we know are nefarious and are detrimental to American society. We've seen this before in Iraq. We've seen this before in Libya.
Right.
You know, but now we've got people like, I want to get this man's name right, Mehdi Hassan, who is written in The Intercept. Now, The Intercept is
it's called let me see. That's Mehdi.
Mehdi. See, this is why I have to have him here, because I'm always going to butcher a foreign person's name, and he's going to correct me because he's just smarter than me.
No,
in that regard. Yes, he is. So Mehdi Hassan has written this article in The Intercept, and the title of the article is "Dear Bashar al-Assad Apologists, your hero is a war criminal even if he didn't gas Syrians." The false equivalency this man makes in this article. Now, I'm not saying that Assad is not a war criminal. Not saying that he's not a monstrous dictator. Not saying that he hasn't done horrendous things. We acknowledged as much on Saturday at the protest and at the teach-in. Our argument as anti-war activists and as anti-imperialists, especially in regard to the United States, is that the United States doesn't have a moral standing in which to wage war on another country for humanitarian reasons. Especially when we have not been asked for help. And nobody asked us for help in Syria. So our stand is against imperialism as American citizens. We don't want our government continuing to be the police of the world. It's not a title anybody gave us, and we need to give it up, because it's literally killing us as a country and as a society. It's bankrupting us morally and financially. But the false equivalency this guy makes is kind of like in the middle of the article, and you have to really read it to get what the problem is. He says, now I totally understand why those of you on the MAGA supporting, Make America Great Again, supporting far right, who cheer for barrel bombs, don't give a damn about any of this. This is Assad's crimes. But to those of you on the anti-war left who have a soft spot for the dictator in Damascus, have you lost your minds, or have you no shame? Since when did being anti-war and anti-imperialist and not wanting the United States to bomb Syria, especially based on what are probably lies about a chemical attack that occurred, since when is that equivalent to us being, us having a soft spot for Bashar al-Assad? That's the false equivalency right there that is incredibly dangerous. Because it literally makes people afraid to criticize our government as to why we're bombing Syria.
But I think that's the intention. I think that the intention of these false equivalencies, as we're putting out, is to silence dissent. It is to isolate Assad from whatever support he had. Even when we were down there with the anti-war rally, even when we did live streams, even when we do public speaking about what's happening in Syria, you know, it's a shame that we always have to do the disclaimer. We're not here to support Assad. Right. We're not here to support Assad. And that has to be done because it's like we live in a world where everybody likes to put people in neat little boxes. You know, and that's the reason why when you were talking about earlier about how the Syrian conflict is so complicated. We can't just explain this away with deep state. And we just can't explain this away with all of the bumper sticker, because the bumper stickers exist on the progressive side too. So we can't just get away with all of our bumper sticker slogans and mentalities in order to explain something that has been going around. There's an article that was published last year, and some people have recirculated it online, where in 1983, this Freedom of Information Act, where it has been revealed that the CIA been having intentions on destroying Syria, and this was in 1983 documents.
Right.
So when we look, so today's headlines, and I would really encourage many of you to go on Brick by Brick today while we're talking about the Palestinian conflict, where on Brick by Brick we put a very extensive timeline on Brick by Brick's page, explaining because now we're talking about the Israel celebrating its independence,
right?
The Palestinians are celebrating the Nakba, or the catastrophe. And so on Brick by Brick we put a story. We put this very extensive timeline from 1900 up to the present, explaining historically the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. So we could put today's headlines in this proper context. So we can't get away explaining these complicated situations with our conspiracy bumper sticker mentalities of, oh, it's deep state, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. No, we no. This requires thinking. This requires that a lot of us change our habits and really study history and study what's going on. So not only can we can be more informed about the situation, but we can approach these things more intelligently and not reactionary all the time. Exactly.
Because see, when you do the research, and yeah, if it's not something that tickles your fancy, it's probably boring, right? But if you are anti-war, if you're serious about being anti-war and anti-imperialist, and wanting the United States out of intervening in other countries' affairs, you have to understand why that is. Why is it a problem that in this country we never question the U.S. involvement or the U.S. support of anything Israel does? Why is that a problem? See, the false equivalency that people make whenever we bring up criticism of U.S.-Israeli policy is that if we're criticizing Israel, then you must be anti-Semitic.
Right.
But if you research the history, the actual history, not the mythology, not the Bible, not the Torah, not any of the religious perspectives, but if you study the actual history of the creation of the nation state of Israel, you can't help but see the injustice that was committed against the Palestinian people, and not just by, at the time, the new government of Israel, but by all of the forces that conspired with them to disenfranchise over 1 million Palestinians from the beginning. But see, the false equivalency silences that dissent. The false equivalency of, if you criticize Israel, then you must hate Jews.
Or you're on the side of the terrorists.
Or you're on the side of the terrorists. I just saw something today. Someone posted something that the Israeli government passed some resolution declaring Hamas a terrorist organization. And because they still call for the destruction of Israel. We were talking the other day that language of pushing Israel into the sea is actually in the outdated and no longer referenced Hamas charter. Hamas doesn't use that charter anymore because they no longer want to push Israel. They recognize.
They know they can't.
They know they can't because they get because they get how many billions of dollars a year from the United States and from Saudi Arabia. Israel gets that support, so they know they can't. They are fighting for the freedom of their people, and they used incendiary language to highlight the plight and the critical nature of their struggle and who the oppressor was. But they don't even say that anymore. But here in 2018, you still have people who are very pro-Zionist who are still claiming that Hamas wants to push Israel into the sea, and they're still calling for the destruction of Israel in their charter, and that's not true. But when you say that, then people automatically say, oh, you're anti-Jewish, you hate Jews, you're anti-Semitic.
Well, you know, and this may be a little off point a little bit, but one of the things that come to my mind is that they one of the Western politicians and those that support the aggression of Israeli aggression, American aggression, NATO aggression when it comes to the so-called Middle Eastern region. I don't like using the term Middle East. It's Africa, but Middle Eastern is a political term that people like to use to separate that stuff from Africa. It's all Africa. But anyway, just to keep things simple, the aggression in the Middle East, they always talk about, oh, Israel, Iran, we have a problem with Iran because they're supplying Hamas or they're supplying Hezbollah with weapons. Hamas is getting his weapons from, the Houthi rebels is getting their weapons from this and this and that and the other. Well, when did reparations turn into military hardware? When did reparations ever turn into military hardware? Because see, why the Western media has us focusing on Iran giving Hezbollah weapons and Russia helping Assad and stuff. How about Germany? Have just built 3 nuclear-powered submarines to give to Israel for free as reparations. How about that? Oh yeah, I know you didn't hear about that. Maybe some of you have. But 3 top-of-the-line German nuclear submarines, which is going to Israel as part of a reparations package. We asked for reparations, and it's got to be.
We can't do that.
Right. I mean,
how are we going to pay for it?
Exactly. We asked for reparations, and it got to be this whole, complicated.
Oh my God, we can't give black people we just can't give black people a check. You can't give black people a check, but you can give Israel aircraft.
3 nuclear-powered
submarines, but the United States can give Israel billions of dollars in financial support, and also
that's aside from weaponry.
And that's the thing, an untold number, because we don't know how much military support we actually give Israel. But see, we can't have these discussions. If we're anti-war, if we're anti-U.S. imperialist, we can't have these discussions without somebody making the false equivalency that because we are criticizing the government of Israel, we must hate all Jewish people and we're anti-Semitic. And that shuts down the discussion about where all this money is going and who's really arming the oppressors in that region.
Exactly. And Vernon Bishop is right. The Israeli army attacked the American warship, the USS Liberty.
Right.
And nothing was never done about it.
Right.
And they also been caught spying on us. They've been caught spying on us.
That's right.
They even in the early days of the Israeli establishment of the Israeli state, they blew up the King David Hotel.
Yes, they did.
Killed many British people there and everything. So, I mean, there's a lot of blood on the hands, man. And they wiped out 200 to 400 Palestinian villages and
500. I think it was 580.
Yeah, so, I mean, but this is the type, this is the type of history that they don't want us to get into. Because the moment that we get into this type of history, the moment that we question why Germany is giving 3 nuclear power submarines to Israel as a reparations package, see, and this is the thing, we hear racists all the time tell us we don't deserve reparations because none of us never been slaves, none of us never did this, never did this. Do you know that the Holocaust survivors, most of them are dead? Those people that's in Israel now, most of them aren't Holocaust survivors. Most of them haven't endured Nazi oppression. That generation, just like that generation, just like the World War II generation, is gone just about.
That's true.
So why is it that they're still receiving reparations? Why is it that their reparations should be in the form of military weaponry?
Right. And again, we always have to make the disclaimer, right? Because people are going to make that false equivalency that, oh, you don't want, you're Holocaust deniers, or you don't think Jews should have a homeland, or you don't recognize the persecution of Jews around the world, or, some ridiculous false equivalency that we have never said. But again, because people jump to those false equivalencies, we can't have an honest discussion about the issue of why are we giving military aid to Israel in the form of reparations? Why is that? But here in this country, people who were in this country before the state of Israel ever existed, we can't even get free college tuition. Mm-mm. We can't get affordable housing. We can't even get equal pay in employment. We can't get our government to enforce existing civil rights laws. So we don't have cops arresting black men who go to Starbucks. That's too. So these false equivalencies, it is really difficult for those of us outside of the political mainstream, because we are. We're not even on the Democratic left. We're outside of those people, because we criticize the DNC.
Yeah, we're
too.
Pluto. I mean, if we were a planet, we would be Pluto. I mean, we're way out of the sun's orbit.
Way out of the sun's orbit.
Yeah.
And we have a hard time. But this is why so many of us have taken to talking about our issues on social media, because we don't get any attention in corporate-owned media. And we know this is true. If you know it's true for us, think about people like, remember when Ed Schultz was on MSNBC?
MSNBC, yeah.
You and I used to watch MSNBC all the time because we loved Ed Schultz.
I used to listen to him when he was on Air America before he got on MSNBC.
Oh my God! Remember Air America?
Yeah. Yep.
And they were leftist, free thinking, criticizing the current establishment. Ed Schultz on MSNBC and Cenk Uygur when he was he on MSNBC or was it
No,
CNN?
he was on MSNBC.
He was on MSNBC.
He got kicked off for criticizing Obama.
He got kicked off. Cenk got kicked off MSNBC for criticizing Obama. Ed Schultz was fired from MSNBC because they told him not to cover Bernie Sanders and don't criticize Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party, and he did it anyway. So where does Cenk go? He takes his MSNBC money and creates the Young Turks. Now,
right.
You can criticize we got plenty of criticism for some of the coverage from the Young Turks, but in order for him to have the platform that he needed to convey his independent message, he couldn't do it on corporate media.
I was going to say, not just the platform, but the freedom.
But the freedom to say what he felt, whether we agree with it or not. Same thing with Ed Schultz. Ed Schultz ended up on RT, Russia Today, just like Lee Camp did. He's on Redacted tonight.
Just like Tom Hartman.
Just like Tom Hartman did. These people came from larger corporate media outlets of some kind, but because they did not toe the corporate line, corporate media didn't want to hear from them anymore.
Right.
So the outlet that wanted to give them a platform to say what they wanted to say was Russia Today. Same thing is true of Sputnik Radio.
Right. Now that's not to say that Russia Today or they didn't have their own agenda for bringing
Sure.
these people on. But again, you can't blame the Ed Schultz and the Ed Schultzes and the Tom Hartmans and all of them for going to as you say, for going to Russia Today may have have its own agenda. I believe they had their agenda of bringing these people on. It wasn't that they really cared too much about leftist politics in this country. But at the same time, if your own American media platforms aren't working, if your own American media platforms aren't giving you the space in order to express your views, and now mind you, now We're supposed to have freedom of speech.
Right.
We're supposed to have freedom of the press. We're supposed to have all of these things that's written on paper. But in practice, you don't get it. Right. So, here you got MSNBC, which is supposed to be a left-leaning network and supposed to have left-leaning platforms and all this stuff. But then again, you can only go so far left. Or you can only criticize the people they sanction that you criticize. And you're supposed to only support the people that they want you to support. It's not democracy. It's not free speech. It's not none of those things. So when you're given a platform where you can express yourself, then why not take it? And I think that it's the same way with Sputnik, that the platform that we go on. CNN, and when we talk about black issues, CNN and all the other American platforms didn't give a damn about what's happening in Ferguson, unless it was sensationalized violence, or what they perceived to be sensationalized violence, unless they could arrange the narrative around bad behaving black people,
right?
And why and not deal with the systemic issues that caused all these things. And they weren't interested in the systemic issues.
Exactly.
So now it's the point where, okay, you're not, you invite these black folk, these black apologists on, who themselves don't want to get into the systemic issues, and people like Jackie and myself and others who they would never bring us on, because we're not going to stick with the script. You know what I mean? And so what happens is that we when there's other platforms that open up, then it's not about whether Russia's sponsoring or not. No, it's about the justice it's about having justice for folks, for black people. It's about having justice for poor people. It's about It's about having social justice in this country. It's about pushing back against the another often used liberal phrase, the oligarchy. Pushing back against the elites and their plans that they have to further impoverish us, to further restrict our freedoms, and all of these things. So that is what's more important. I don't give a damn who's going to give me the mic. Right. I don't care who gives me the mic. The thing of it is about what having our voices heard. And if I can't get that, from American sponsored media, then I got to go somewhere else or create our own. This is why we created this.
Exactly.
So we can have our own voice.
Exactly. And the reason we bring this up is because right now, just this whole neo-McCarthyism that's going on in this country, that the corporate-owned media is perpetrating against not just Russia Today and Sputnik, because Sputnik was actually forced to register as a foreign agent. But they're also going after the people who appear on the programs on these stations. Like we went to, we were at the teach-in Saturday, and Brian Becker, who hosts Loud and Clear, said that someone went on by any means necessary on Sputnik Radio, and someone from Georgia who lives and works in Georgia. And when their employer found out that they were a guest on a show that was hosted on Sputnik Radio, they lost their job.
Yep, they did. Yep. This is free speech.
Right. And not only did we hear that happened, but there is an article that was published in the on WABE. It's the Atlanta affiliate of NPR. And the article.
Yeah, can you put that over there?
Let me see if I can get this over here, because I said I wasn't going to do a whole lot of sharing stuff tonight, but I think this is important that you see this, because as you know, Anoa Shanga is dear to us. She's a personal friend, and she is just smart as hell when it comes to. She's smart as hell, period. She's just smart as hell.
Very brilliant.
She is a full-time mom, works a full-time job, and then she is still a badass activist in Atlanta, really digging into Atlanta politics, and not just Atlanta politics, but Georgia politics. A critical voice.
Yes.
In the really heated up races down there in Georgia, a very critical, independent thinker, a leftist voice, a very strong voice for black advocacy and black liberation and black agency in politics. And this is the kind of garbage that gets published about Anoa in the Atlanta affiliate of NPR, National Public Radio. They don't talk about her as an activist and the work that she's doing. No, the headline is Atlanta activist uses Russian-backed media to spread message.
Yeah, well, I mean, is people seeing this?
Yeah, people can see it. And the person who wrote this article is Johnny Kaufman. Now, this is the Facebook page. We have been, the friends and supporters and followers of Anoa have been honestly staging a campaign, not just because of our personal connection with Anoa,
right,
but because this kind of yellow journalism is another example of the kind of false equivalency that is the only reason people do it is to silence dissent. And
black dissent. And
just
we say this constantly on this show.
Yep.
That black dissent in this country has always been seen as threatening.
Mm-hmm. Now let me.
So now that we have this whole history, I mean, now that it's all of this Russian baiting and Russian hating.
Yep.
And stuff. So now it's like, again, this is the 21st century Red Scare.
It is. It is. Now, this kind of garbage. Because we know that a lot of people are just lazy and don't read past the headlines. We just talked about this before we came on the show. Because we just posted, and we're going to do a whole, a separate show
right.
about this study that we just that was just posted today
mm-hmm.
by Sandy Darity and Derek Hamilton and the team of economists at the New School in New York City, just dispelling all the myths about how we combat income inequality in regard to black people.
Right.
We can't even gloss over that study on tonight's show because it is so deep. But we posted it on our page and like one person responded to it. And we were like, what the heck is wrong with people? But then we had to remember, you know what? People don't like to read past headlines. And that's why Twitter is so popular, because people get to express thoughts and read thoughts in 288 characters. They don't have to read a whole article. They can just read somebody's synopsis. So people don't read past headlines. And people aren't going to go to Anoa's page and listen to her shows. They're not going to listen to her podcasts. They're not going to go to By Any Means Necessary, because this article also smeared By Any Means
Eugene,
Necessary and
yeah.
Eugene Puryear.
Yeah.
These are critical black voices, or leftist black voices, who raise issues concerning black people that you're not hearing raised, certainly not by Republicans, definitely not by Democrats. You're not hearing these issues raised on CNN. You're not hearing these issues raised on MSNBC. Sputnik is the only platform that would give Eugene Puryear the mic.
Yep, that's right. The only one that would pass the mic.
The only one, right, exactly. The only platform that would pass the mic to a black activist who would have a show where he constantly criticizes the DC government for their crappy affordable housing program and the way they waste these billions of dollars and throw money at the Wizards to build a practice stadium, but you can't build affordable housing. Constantly on his show talking about the NEAR Act, which is critical to community policing and police reform in Washington, D.C., criticizing the police chief and highlighting the murders of black D.C. residents by D.C. police that no other outlet is going to talk about. These people are not going to go past this BS headline and listen to a Noah's article where she debated somebody from the Heritage Foundation on By Any Means Necessary, or no, it was on Loud and Clear, on Loud and Clear, and took them down on the BS voter fraud claim. That was done on Loud and Clear on Sputnik Radio. But people aren't going to go and listen to Anoa's work and read her work on Progressive Army. All they're going to do is make this false equivalence that this article made, this author made in this article about her going on Sputnik Radio, which is a network funded by the Russian government. Mm-hmm. And all that does, yeah, we're going to give you a link to that article, because we're going to give you a link to that article because we want you to go to the WABE Atlanta page and leave a comment on that article about how crappy that foolishness is.
You know, I couldn't help but think that why, we were talking about this, I couldn't help but think about how they did the Russian smear with Paul Robeson, how they did it with W.B. Du Bois, how they did it with so many others of black people who, black dissenters, how they did it with the Black Panthers by saying that they were influenced by the Russians
or the Chinese,
and others that black activists. So I mean, this is nothing new. This is what they do. And see, NPR, which I've always said that NPR, people were surprised. Oh, why did NPR publish that article? Well, NPR basically, to me, they're corporate media too. Yeah. I mean, even though they don't have corporate funding, but they to me, they carry the water for they carry the water too. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So they're not truly independent. So I just think that when you're talking about Anoa, Eugene, and all of this smear campaign tactics with the Russians, it's a long history of that. Again, once I said, we can go all the way back to the 1900s, where black dissenters were the press at that time were trying to tie black dissenters with the anarchists and the Communist Party and all this stuff. So it's nothing new, and that's why we got to constantly keep fighting against it.
And the thing that the false equivalency of, she went on this Russian-backed network, so she must be spewing Russian propaganda. The thing that people refuse to think about is, what is it that Eugene and Brian Becker and John Kiriakou and Garland Nixon and Lee Stranahan and us and other people, what is it that we have to say that Sputnik Radio values that no other network wants to hear? What is it that Anoa has to say that is so valuable to Sputnik that CNN doesn't want to hear, that MSNBC doesn't want to hear? Because we immediately go, because that's what that kind of yellow journalism is intended to do, to keep people from critically thinking about issues, the issues we are talking about on these outlets, and automatically dismissing and delegitimizing the work that Anoa and these other people do, and that we do, because of our association with this outlet. And another thing that people do that has started to kind of bother me, that we need to stop doing on the left. Ever since this whole George Soros funds this and Soros funds that, we have always said that you do have to be careful who you accept money from, because sometimes, people will give you money and there are strings attached. So you have to be careful about who you accept money from. We think that's absolutely true. That's reasonable. And we believe, and I think I can go out on a limb and say, we know for sure that if at any time anybody from Sputnik Radio told Eugene Puryear or Brian Becker or John Kiriakou, you can't say this, you have to say that, you have to say that. Or if they said this to Garland or Lee, no, you can't criticize Putin, because if you ever listen to any of these shows, these people criticize Putin all the time, right along with criticizing the U.S. government.
I know when we went on there, we were never told that we couldn't talk about this. Or
Never
we couldn't talk about that. So.
I was reminded that I couldn't cuss. That's the one thing they told us that we couldn't say. Other than that, whatever. Nobody ever said to us, "Don't say, oh, you can't say that about Putin. You can't say that
about Israel."
Israel. No, I am confident. I think we can confidently say that if at any time anybody at Sputnik Radio said that to any of those people, they'd be gone. They'd walk. They'd tell them, you can take your show and you can take your check and we can go somewhere else. But Sputnik hasn't said that to any of them. On the contrary, these people have provided critical analyses of policies and politics and politicians, and the U.S. government and other foreign governments that you're not going to hear on corporate-owned media. And then you have people who are saying, well, people actually said this on a Noah's Twitter feed, well, she's paid by the Russians, so who could trust her? Well, I'm paid by a defense contractor. So, I mean, that's my day job. I tried my best not to work on an actual defense contract. But if you looked at the company that paid me, you wouldn't be happy with it either. I'm not, but we need to pay this mortgage.
Well, that also shows you how ignorant people are talking about who's paid by who. In an economy that's global like this,
right?
Companies have, I mean, even like you said about defense contract, everybody got their hands in everybody else's cookie jar. You don't know where the hell your money coming from.
Look,
for real. Unless
you are baking your own cookies and selling them on the street, if you're getting a paycheck from a company, from a corporation, there's somebody's dirty along the way. That's no excuse to take money from anybody. Like we said, we do believe you have to be careful who you take money from, and be sure that they are not giving you that paycheck with strings attached. We are here saying that we believe that there are no strings attached with the platforms that these people are provided on Sputnik Radio. There are none. And for the record, when you are a guest on these shows, they don't pay you nothing. Sometimes you might not even get snacks. If you don't
Trust me, 'cause I look for them all the time we go there. Yep. They used to have those nice little candies, and they haven't been... But they said that the lady that usually puts them out,
the receptionist, she was on vacation.
Yeah,
so
I hope she's off tomorrow. I hope she's back
She better be back tomorrow, because the candies were really good. And then sometimes they have cookies too. But we don't get paid. Guests don't get paid to be on these shows. These are people who value our perspective, and they invite us on these shows to speak the truth. And instead of people wanting to hear the truth that we are speaking, you got people believing the false narratives about, oh, well, she's on a Russian outlet, so she must be spreading propaganda for Russia. No, you're believing the propaganda from the United States government that's using this yellow journalism, this neo-McCarthyism, to silence dissent. They did it with Cenk Uygur. They did it with people like Ed Schultz. They did it with Melissa Harris Perry. And now they're doing it to us. The last bastion of independent journalists and thinkers and commentators. And it is just ridiculous that people are falling for it. It's insane. It is absolutely insane, and it is a frightening indictment on how easily people on the left are misled to believe these, to fall for these false equivalencies, and end up being unwitting accomplices to the very powers that they claim they're fighting against. You talk about you're fighting against the oligarchy and the corporate-owned media, but you're believing everything the corporate-owned media is telling you about independent journalists. Seriously, I don't like to call people stupid, but how stupid are you? Those of you who believe in this garbage. And these are the very people who will be quick to call people tools of the establishment, or this one's an agent, or this one's paid by that one. But you're the one believing the corporate, what did I call it? The great capitalist party, the great capitalist party's party line. You're the one believing that. So now we've got independent journalists, and it is especially dangerous for black journalists out here fighting for legitimacy on the left, among leftists, because the corporate media told you that they were connected to the Russians. It's shameful. It is shameful that we are still so easily duped by the very powers that we think we're fighting against.
Yep.
So what else
That's all I got.
So, excuse me. Let me see what we've got over here in the comments on YouTube. Morland Gall says, I was trapped in this debate with another progressive about RT recently. They don't think. They just assume you are handling Kremlin scripts. Yep, fruit of the poison vine. It's fruit of the poison tree, which is the legal term, or something like that. Oh, legal term. That's interesting because Noah is actually a lawyer. So if anybody thinks that we're talking about some black lady who is not on her game and is not qualified in every way possible to be conveying commentary about leftist politics, you're messing with the wrong one. You're messing with the wrong. You are questioning the intelligence of the wrong party in this one, folks. Let's see. What do we have for comments over here on Facebook?
Well, this been acting up. I don't know if they, but I have Bruce Jang, who was just talking about, talking about people being Putin puppets and all those type of things, and hold on, and Lisa Cassette. I'm sorry, y'all, but they've been messing with the Facebook over here because they're listening to what we're saying. So so it's all this stuff about let's try to throw a wrench in it.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm having problems over here.
Well, let me see if I can pull the comments up on the phone without causing a whole lot of disruption. So Lisa Catlett said, I read the study and I also follow a Noah. Good. And invite your friends to follow a Noah. Check out By Any Means Necessary. Check out Loud and Clear. Do check out Fault Lines on Sputnik, and they have their show is in the morning. Just a great back and forth between Garland and Lee. They don't agree on a lot of stuff, but I mean, there was this whole thing, remember, in the summer where people on the left are talking about we need to work with racists. We need to work with the alt-right to get Medicare for all. It's not that we don't think that we can find common ground with people who are politically conservative. It's just that we don't want to work with actual racists. But Fault Lines is one of those shows, which is a good example of where you can find common ground with people who politically you don't agree with. So, check those shows out. Bruce Jang called NPR National Petroleum Radio.
Yeah, I thought that was funny.
That was good. Chanel Pittman said, I wish I had more time for all these podcasts. That's true. That's the other thing. I'm so glad you brought that point out, Chanel, because the owners of corporate media know that Americans are overworked, we're overstressed, we're overtired. We don't have time for our families, let alone time to sit in front of a television for hours and watch Al Jazeera, or watch a comprehensive news program. See, I can do that because I work from home for now. But most people don't have the luxury of doing that. And I understand that. But so do they. So that's why When you watch the news, when you watch MSNBC or CNN or any of the local affiliates that are now almost all owned by either the Sinclair Group or some other corporate entity, all you get are the same talking points.
Yep.
You get the exact same talking points across all of these outlets. So, because they know that by the time you get home for the 6 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news, your brain is fried. And you literally are so overwhelmed with life that you just don't have the capacity to consume all the rest of this stuff. So they feed you the state approved, yes, the government, the state approved, the GOP approved, or the DNC approved talking points. Anything outside of that, they're leaving that out. They don't want you to know about that. That's why all of these podcasts are so important. So over here, listen, okay, Vincier, Maury, not all of the right are part of the alt-right. We know this. There's not a whole lot of you just have to go back and look at some more of our shows. We don't make a whole lot of apologies on this show about what we believe, but we certainly don't believe that the alt-right is of no consequence. There is no person in this country, on this planet, that is ever going to tell a black person that a bunch of racists in any form or iteration are of no consequence. That is an historically uninformed comment to make. We just watched, speaking of Al Jazeera, we just watched a documentary yesterday about the Golden Dawn movement in Greece. Let me tell you why we can't dismiss the alt-right. If you don't believe in American history and how dangerous racists are, no matter how many of them there are. In Greece, the alt-right has morphed into this movement called Golden Dawn. They are openly supportive of Nazis. They will throw up a Nazi salute in a minute. They are not apologetic. They are unapologetic about supporting Nazis and Nazism. They are training paramilitarily to kill immigrants with weapons. And they just recently won third place in the Greek parliamentary vote. They are the third largest political party in Greece right now. The rise of the alt-right, neo-fascism, neo-Nazism, whatever you want to call it, in places like Greece and Turkey and Poland, that coincides with the rise of racist politics in the United States, coalescing in the form of Donald Trump. This is not something that we can dismiss as inconsequential. Because these people recognize that they need advocates in the government.
Right.
They need advocates in politics to advance their policies. So while the kids are on college campuses in khakis and polo shirts, marching around with tiki torches, and we're laughing at them because they have tiki torches, and we think that's funny, they are electing politicians for state, local, and federal government offices. We laugh at them at our own peril. We dismiss them at our peril. So, that's the end of my rant about that. So, the hour is up, ladies and gentlemen. Time flies so fast when we're having fun. We are going to have a special show. I think we did tell you that because of everything we do have going on, we do have to stick to one show a week. We cannot do 2 shows a week right now. It's just too much. So Thursday nights at 9 p.m. it is. But because this report has come out, has been published by Sandy Darity and Derek Hamilton and the other economists at the from the New School in New York. We're going to do a special show on Sunday night. We'll let you know what time, probably around...
Yeah, it'll be a little earlier.
It'll be earlier than 9. It'll probably be around 7 o'clock, where we are going to talk about that report. And it will probably be the first in a series of shows. This report is that important. This is one of those things where we recognize people are counting on us to explain a very dense subject to you, because you don't have time to sit there and read a 50-page report. So we're going to talk about the report on the mistakes we make in addressing the income gap or the wealth gap in Black America on Sunday. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, please share this video, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook. Consider supporting us either through a monthly contribution on Patreon or a one-time donation on PayPal or GoFundMe. You can find us on all 3 platforms under Luqman Nation, LuqManNation. Check us out. And follow us on Twitter also. I always forget that. Follow us on Twitter, Luqman Nation 1, the number 1. Check us out on Fridays on Loud and Clear. Yes, on Sputnik Radio. We always post the link to the Friday segment on midterm politics. What else?
Pitbulls and Politics.
Pitbulls and Politics on Saturday nights. Adult content. Lot of fun.
I mean, I know people probably look at this and say, damn, he just sitting here not saying anything. But look, come on, Pitbulls and Politics, and I'm usually, I love that platform. It's something that I really I have fun on there, and so a lot of you that's on here, usually check it out. So, but I have fun on that show, so, and I have fun here too. But I'm just saying,
yeah, Pitbull and Politics really is his thing. It's the Pitbull's thing, and he is very good at it, and he does a great job. I have fun running the board for him and not running my mouth so much. So thank y'all so much for tuning in tonight. As always, be good to each other. Have a great night. Peace. I can't find the button. Oh, there it is. Oh, and that's the wrong thing. Okay. There we go. See, this is what happens when people won't give you a CNN paycheck.
Yeah. Good morning, evening, friend.